The grand house stood silently, a monument to a life once vibrant, now merely a cold, echoing shell. Richard, a man whose vast wealth could command nearly anything, found himself utterly powerless against the crushing weight of grief. Each step through the opulent, empty halls resonated with the absence of his beloved Clara, his wife, who had been the very heart of this home. Her laughter, her warmth, her quiet presence, all gone, leaving behind a silence that pressed in on him, a constant, physical ache. But the most profound, most agonizing silence belonged to Liam, his precious 7-year-old son. Before, Liam had been a whirlwind of energy, his bright chatter and infectious giggles filling every corner. Now he was a quiet island, adrift in his own solitary world. Not a single word had escaped his lips since the accident. His bright, curious eyes had dulled, replaced by a distant, unreadable gaze that offered no window into his thoughts. Richard had poured every resource into finding a solution: renowned specialists, innovative therapists, desperate journeys to famous clinics. But each attempt had crumbled, leaving him more defeated than before. Every failed effort was a sharp chisel, chipping away at the last fragments of his hope, leaving him feeling utterly, agonizingly helpless. The chasm between father and son widened with each passing, silent day, a painful, constant reminder of everything they had irrevocably lost. He watched Liam, a ghost in his own home, and wondered if he would ever truly see his son again. The arrival of Sophia was like a gentle breeze through the stale, heavy air of the house, a subtle shift that Richard hadn't realized he craved. She was just 10 years old, the daughter of Maria, Richard's new housekeeper. Maria was a kind, quiet woman, efficient in her duties, but it was Sophia who truly brought a different energy. Unlike the stern faces of the endless stream of therapists or the hushed, almost reverent tones of the other staff, Sophia was simply Sophia. She hummed softly as she helped her mother, her bright, curious eyes taking everything in, yet never lingering uncomfortably on Liam. Liam, who usually retreated deeper into himself when strangers were near, simply watched her from a distance, a flicker of something unidentifiable in his usually vacant eyes. Sophia, with her bright, imaginative spirit and an intuitive understanding of the world around her, wasn't fazed by Liam's silence. She didn't try to coax words from him or bombard him with questions, as so many adults had. Instead, she seemed to listen to the silence itself. She'd sit across the vast living room, on the plush carpet, completely engrossed in her own world of drawing. Her sketchbook was a portal to vibrant landscapes and fantastical creatures, and she'd hum a soft, wordless tune as her pencils danced across the page. One quiet afternoon, as she sketched a whimsical fox with a long, bushy tail, she felt, rather than saw, Liam's intense gaze. He was watching her, his small body unmoving, but his eyes were fixed on her drawing. This was the pattern interrupt. Instead of attempting to engage him directly, Sophia simply continued. She finished her fox, adding a mischievous glint to its eye. Then, slowly, deliberately, she picked up a bright yellow crayon. With a gentle, almost imperceptible smile, she slid it across the polished wooden floor towards him. Liam, who hadn't touched a toy, a book, or anything offered to him in months, hesitated. His small hand, usually clenched, uncurled slightly. His gaze flickered from the crayon to Sophia's calm, patient face. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement that made Richard, watching unseen from the doorway, hold his breath, Liam reached out. His fingers, trembling ever so slightly, closed around the yellow crayon. Sophia didn't react with excitement or even a verbal acknowledgement. She simply nodded once, a tiny, encouraging gesture, and returned to her own drawing. After a long moment, Liam, still clutching the yellow crayon, slowly reached for a blank page in a discarded magazine. He pressed the crayon to the paper, and with an almost painful effort, began to draw. It was a wobbly, uneven circle, but it was unmistakably his son. A small, lopsided sun that glowed with a fragile, burgeoning hope. It was a tiny gesture, but to Sophia, it was a giant leap. She understood. Liam was communicating, just not with words. She continued her ritual, leaving small, colorful drawings for him. A deep blue bird, a lush green tree, a vibrant red apple. She began to notice the subtle ways his eyes followed the hues, how a faint tremor might pass through his small fingers when she placed a particularly bright color near him. Sophia, with her innate empathy, began bringing simple flashcards with common objects, then even a few with simple Mandarin characters, noticing his subtle responses to the tonal shifts of the language. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a quiet, persistent offering of connection, a gentle invitation back into the world. Richard, observing these silent, yet profound interactions from a cautious distance, felt a flicker of hope he hadn't known was possible. He had seen countless celebrated therapists try and fail, but this 10-year-old girl, with her crayons and her quiet patience, seemed to be reaching a part of Liam no one else could. Could this truly be the breakthrough he had so desperately prayed for? And if so, what magic did this child possess? Sophia's visits quickly became the anchoring point of Liam's day, a vibrant contrast to the monotonous quiet that had long enveloped the grand house. Each afternoon, she would arrive, her small backpack filled not with toys, but with tools of connection, fresh paper, a kaleidoscope of crayons, simple picture books, and those intriguing Mandarin flashcards. She never demanded, never pushed. Instead, she simply was there, a steady, patient presence. Liam, who once seemed oblivious to the world around him, now showed subtle signs of anticipation. Richard often caught him by the window, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in his posture, the only indication of his eagerness, as Sophia's small figure appeared down the driveway. Sophia, with her innate understanding of Liam's unique way of communicating, continued to expand her methods. She noticed how certain colors seemed to calm him, how the soft rustle of a new drawing emerging from her pad would draw his gaze. She didn't just draw for him. She started drawing with him, guiding his hand gently over the paper, teaching him to blend colors, to create new shades. She'd tell him simple stories, her voice a soft, melodic hum, weaving tales around the pictures they created together. Liam, once completely unresponsive, began to make small, almost imperceptible sounds, a soft hum when a color pleased him, a tiny sigh of contentment. He started pointing first to a particular crayon, then to an object in a picture, and eventually to a flashcard. His world, once silent and solitary, was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to acquire new dimensions. Then, Sophia introduced a new, whimsical ritual. She explained to Liam, in words as soft as whispers, that words were like tiny seeds. Each new word they learned, she would carefully write on a small slip of paper. Together, they would then plant it in a pot of rich, dark soil that sat on the sunniest windowsill in the conservatory. "We give them light," she'd say, patting the soil, and water and care, and they grow, just like you're growing, Liam. Liam watched, utterly fascinated, as she carefully placed the first slip bearing the word light into the earth. For days, they would meticulously water their word garden, Sophia patiently explaining how warmth and nurturing helped life unfurl from a tiny seed. The breakthrough, when it came, was so quiet, so profound, it felt almost sacred. It was with the word liberté, freedom. Sophia had chosen it because it symbolized what she desperately hoped for Liam. They had planted it a week ago. One crisp morning, as they checked their pot, Liam pointed a tiny, trembling finger. From the dark earth, a minuscule green sprout had emerged, pushing its way defiantly towards the sun, reaching for the light. Sophia gasped, her bright eyes widening with wonder and disbelief. Liam, his own eyes fixed, mesmerized on the fragile sprout, took a deep, shaky breath. Then a sound, almost imperceptible, a whisper barely louder than the rustle of leaves, escaped his lips. Liberté. It was the first word he had spoken in over a year. a fragile, hopeful sound that echoed with profound meaning in the vast, silent house. Richard, drawn by Sophia's sudden intake of breath, rushed into the conservatory. He stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest, as Liam, seeing his father, reached out and gently, reverently, touched the tiny sprout. The wave of emotion that washed over Richard was overwhelming, a potent mix of disbelief, surging relief, and an immense, almost suffocating gratitude. Sophia, tears brimming in her eyes, simply offered a small, knowing smile. The seed of Liam's voice had been planted, and it was, against all odds, beginning to grow. Richard knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this 10-year-old girl held a unique, almost magical key to his son's healing. He had to trust her completely and follow where her gentle intuition led. But the path to healing is rarely a straight line, and not everyone would understand Sophia's quiet magic. Richard, being a man of science and logic, initially harbored a quiet skepticism about Sophia's unconventional methods. He had invested heavily in traditional therapies, hiring Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned pediatric behaviorist, to assess Liam's progress. Dr. Reed was brilliant, articulate, and highly respected in her field. However, during her assessment, Liam retreated completely, his eyes empty, his body stiff. He remained utterly silent, even when Dr. Reed tried to engage him with various stimuli. The session was a frustrating failure. After Dr. Reed left, a palpable tension filled the air. Richard was disheartened, but Sophia, with her usual quiet resolve, retrieved her drawing pad. Liam, still seemingly disengaged, slowly took a crayon. To Richard's astonishment, Liam began to draw. He drew a figure, unmistakably Dr. Reed, but with sharp, aggressive red lines radiating from her mouth and ears. He then scribbled a single word beside the drawing, loud. Sophia, understanding immediately, gently explained, "He means she was loud, Papa," but she wasn't listening. The simplicity of Liam's observation struck Richard like a bolt of lightning. He had been so focused on fixing Liam, on finding a scientific solution, that he hadn't truly listened to his son's unique way of communicating. He realized that perhaps he was part of the problem, projecting his own anxieties onto Liam, rather than understanding Liam's world. The drawing was a profound revelation, a stark mirror reflecting Richard's own failings. He saw then that true healing wasn't about imposing a cure, but about creating an environment where understanding could flourish. Sophia wasn't just teaching Liam to speak. She was teaching Richard to listen. This turning point was pivotal. It wasn't about the methods anymore, but about the connection. And in Sophia's gentle presence, that connection was blossoming. The final breakthrough came on a warm afternoon. Sophia had been introducing Liam to different names, written on cards, placing them amongst their word seeds. She'd point to Sophia, then to herself, a gentle smile on her face. Liam, who had begun making small sounds and even a few simple words, seemed to be processing something profound. Then, he picked up the card with her name, looked at her, his eyes clear and focused, and said, with a voice that was still soft but unmistakably intentional, "Sophia." It was more than just a word. It was an acknowledgement, a recognition of the bond they shared. That very evening, Richard, still reeling from the day's events, entered Liam's room to say goodnight. "Good night, Liam," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Liam, snuggled in his bed, looked up at his father, his eyes shining. A moment of silence stretched between them. Then Liam, with a soft, clear voice, replied, "Night, Papa." Richard froze, tears welling in his eyes. It was the simplest of phrases, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken words, a bridge finally built between a father and son. Overwhelmed with gratitude and a profound shift in perspective, Richard called a press conference, not to announce a new business venture, but something far more meaningful. He stood before the cameras, a transformed man, and announced the establishment of the Clara Institute, named after his late wife. This institute, he explained, would be dedicated to connecting with children who faced unique communication challenges, focusing on understanding their individual worlds rather than fixing them. He introduced Sophia, no longer just the housekeeper's daughter, but the lead guide, the heart of this new endeavor. At the Institute's first graduation ceremony, 2 years later, a 9-year-old Liam stood confidently on stage. He spoke with a quiet assurance, his voice steady. "The first word I learned was a color," he began, looking at Sophia, "and the last word is this family." As he spoke, Richard, standing in the audience, reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out an envelope, a simple adoption application for Sophia. It wasn't a gesture of charity, but of deep love and belonging. Sophia, who had entered their lives as a caregiver's child, had become family, not by obligation, but by the undeniable language of the heart. The story of Liam and Sophia resonated deeply. It reminded everyone that silence isn't always an absence. Sometimes it's a profound presence, a space where healing and truth can emerge. It was a story of a little boy who was no longer alone, a young girl finally seen for her extraordinary gift, and a man who, at last, learned to truly listen. It was a testament to the quiet power of connection, proving that sometimes the most profound solutions are found not in grand gestures or scientific breakthroughs, but in the gentle art of presence and understanding.